Howdy, folks. This is Scott Berger, and you're listening to another episode of Keep the Dream Flowing, a Woodstock 1969 podcast. And with me, as always, is the former, what would you say, referee?
Yes.
For
ice hockey.
For a former ice hockey referee, recently retired, still living down, way down yonder in Dixie. The man with the best hair, on the podcast. I say that because, you've got me and that doesn't really count for anything. Mr. Paul Dittmer, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Hey. And it is our delight to present the maiden of the Finger Lakes. She is to the Finger Lakes what the Statue of Liberty is to New York Harbor. Ladies and gentlemen, Aaron Scheer.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, see?
See the pose. Let's see the pose. There you go. All right.
And our guest today is actually quite a remarkable man. And I'm going to tell you, Eric, one of the many reasons why you're quite remarkable is that it is so good to have a person who grew up in Woodstock, in the town of Woodstock, on the show, and to have experienced everything that you've experienced. And you wrote a book, and we're going to cover all that stuff. But it is our delight to present to you the great Eric Greenberg, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey.
Cue applause.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's where you get the crowd noise in,
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
Put the crowd noise in right there.
Right.
And actually, you're coming to us, we said this before, but you're coming to us live from the Pacific Northwest, actually.
Yeah, actually just south of Bellingham, Washington, the south end of Lake Whatcom in the country.
Yeah, beautiful country up there.
It is.
We have to trace your journey up there, of course, but it is great to have you here because you were literally at ground zero for pretty much everything that we've ever talked about on this show, in terms of just being in Woodstock at the right time and being at the sound outs and everything else that you experienced. But did you, just to begin, did you actually, because I know you moved around a bit up in that area of New York. When did you first arrive in Woodstock?
Okay, I was actually born in Kingston, New York, which is about 8 miles outside of Woodstock.
Yeah,
and lived in the neighboring communities around Woodstock up until the time I was about 9 years old. My parents broke up, and my father moved to Woodstock, and I moved in with him. And so at the age of 9 in 1963.
oh, that's great. See, one of the things that in the interview that I heard that you did that I thought was funny was there was a story about you wanting to dig a tunnel from your house to overlook mountain. And I thought that was kind of funny because when I was a kid, I grew up in Connecticut, and I wanted to dig a tunnel from my house to the local mountain that was in the area. And I actually did put a hole in the ground, but...
well, you got further than I did. You got further than me, because when I started digging, it was Overlook Mountain. I was living in Ruby. I had just turned 3. Yeah. And we had just moved there, and my dad had taken me on a hike up Overlook Mountain. At some point, carried me on his shoulders half the way, which was a phenomenal feat when you consider the height of the mountain. At any rate, it was all autumn at the time when we moved in our backyard. Overlook was plastered as our backyard ornament, so to speak, all decked out in its oranges and reds and greens and what have you. And it just seemed like a few shovelfuls away. And the best way to get there, rather than tracing through other people's property, was to dig a tunnel. So, but I waited and procrastinated. And by the time I decided to do it, it had turned to winter. And we had about 8 inches of snow on the ground. And I took out a snow shovel and gave it my best shot. And we had about 8 inches, like I said, of snow. And I jumped up on it, and the snow shovel bent in half, and I ended up with snow plastered all over my face. And I realized that there was no way I was going to make it through the frozen ground. So I figured maybe it might even cost some money to get there, to get the project going. So I put it on a back burner, and didn't resurrect the idea until I met a guy that I thought might have the cash to do it, which was several years later, well before the Woodstock Festival. I had already moved to Woodstock, and there's a guy my dad used to have debates with all the time. And I bring up a subject: the sky's blue. And they say, no, it's not, it's gray, or it's this or that. Or I try to interject, and they say, no, shut up, kid, we're talking. It's like, wait a second, I'm the one that brought up the subject. Well, anyway, as time went on, a copy of Look magazine comes before me, and they put it on the table there in the Cafe Espresso on the, and says, you see this guy? They open it up, and there's this whole double-page insert of a guy. And I said, you see this guy anywhere in the room? So I look at my dad's friend, I look at my dad, and all around the room, and no, I didn't think anyone was that famous could be in the same room as me anyway. So I'm looking around, and all of a sudden I see my dad's friend handing him a $5 bill. I go, what's that about? And the guy looks at me, he says, well, it's me. I said, who? He says, me, Bobby. I said, that's you? He says, yeah. And so Dad said, well, I told you no one would recognize you, because he was afraid. That was Bob Dylan. And he was afraid that no one would, he wouldn't get any privacy for the rest of his life, which was actually true. It actually, people hounded him and whatever. That's one of the reasons he had to leave Woodstock. But, I proved it wrong because I didn't recognize him, and my dad won $5 out of the deal. But at any rate, it occurred to me that this guy, being that he actually was in Look magazine, probably had the cash to build that tunnel. So I approached him. A couple of weeks later, I had the opportunity. I went, Bobby, Mr. Dillon, can I have a word? It was my first sales pitch ever. I was still 9 years old. It was 63, late 63. And maybe I was 10. At any rate, he said, can I speak to you privately? And we go to the middle of the room. He says, is this private enough? I said, no. So we go to the corner of the room, away from everyone. I said, look, I'd like to be your partner. And he says, as my partner, what would you do with me? What would you do for me or with me? I looked at him and I said, well, here's the line, my first sales pitch ever. I said, well, I'd help you spend your money. And you never saw a guy turn so many different colors at the same time. He went from green to gray to, anyway, it looked like a ghost was chasing him, and he whisked out of the cafe. He didn't show up for a couple, 3 weeks. No one knew where Bobby went. Everyone said, what did you say to Bobby, kid? Yeah. And I said, I didn't say nothing. So I'm walking around by the village green a couple weeks later, and old Hudson pulls up to me with suicide doors, and the passenger door swings open. There's Bobby sitting at the wheel. He goes, get in, kid. They always called me kid. At any rate, I hop in, I know the guy, and I said, now I get my chance to tell him what I was talking about, because he still had no clue. He says, kid, you'll never get anything without working for it. You have to earn it yourself. There's no way anything's going to ever come to you that, easy. You have to earn everything. We're going through ride all through the Catskills and everything, he's telling me, and he's just bawling me out basically from beginning to end. I can't get a word in edgewise to even tell him what the hell I was trying to talk to him about until he kicks me back out of the car. Yeah. So my head's spinning. I mean, this is the guy that wrote "Ain't Gonna Work on Maggie's Farm No More," right? Telling me how I got to join the system. At any rate, So anytime from then on, especially after the band moved to town, anytime any of them saw me, including Bobby, whether it was in public or at the Espresso or whatever, they pull over their car, they roll their window down and motion me over, and they go, "Kid," it would be Rick Danko or Garth or whoever, how you doing in school, kid? Okay. I'm doing okay. Basically, with my indiscretion of asking for his partnership.
Yeah.
But, that's how I met Bob Dylan. But that's all about Overlook Mountain.
Yeah, I mean, that's
You broke.
just
You actually got the whole started. I didn't even get that part, but I got in a whole
it's
lot of trouble for it.
yeah, well, of course. I mean, it's incredible. They recently reopened the Cafe Espresso, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
closed pretty much immediately after. They were trying to do, for our listeners out there who don't know, they were trying to. It was sort of like a recreation. Um, Combined with a kind of small Dylan museum type of thing. And
Dylan Museum. Not to interrupt, but the guy Du Bois, who was a poster,
yeah,
he did all some really cool posters,
yeah,
everything. But I thought they commercialized it too much.
Yeah.
And, it's just too. I
yeah.
don't know. For me, it was too cheap and flaky, and everything's overpriced in there.
Oh yeah.
You know.
I bought a hat there, and it was like a $50 hat, and I was just
Oh,
because I felt like I should do something, but the coffee was okay, like it was
uh-huh.
it was all fine. God
Yeah.
knows that Tinker Street could use a good coffee shop, but
Yeah, right. Up the block, I mean, I actually experienced almost a $28 carrot juice. So, yeah,
wow,
no
my
kidding.
goodness,
Yeah.
$28.
Yeah, I actually paid it. I don't know why I did. I shouldn't have. I should have called the cop.
They have a couple of little stores over there that sell just ridiculously overpriced stuff. It's that the talk in the town is that, and my wife feels the same way because we're glorified, as they call us, glorified locals up there now. So we've
Okay.
been going up there for years,
Yes.
and it just got everything got overpriced and it went downhill quickly once the next batch of New York City folk came roaring in.
Okay. Well, I can explain all that if you want to know
Yes, please.
why.
Yeah.
Okay. Woodstock has a zoning law that you can only have a certain amount of plots of land, period. So if you're sitting on, let's say, 9 acres and you want to subdivide it, you can't do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you inherited that from your family growing up as an original Woodstocker, okay, and you're paying property tax on that, your property tax is going up and up and up and up, and you're not making any extra money, and you can't sell it, and you're stuck with it. You end up having to sell. So what happens is you're selling your property. Everyone's selling their property now to wealthy New Yorkers that coming up from the city that can afford it, and it causes the property values to go way up. Because all that's happening while that's happening. And so what problems that they're running into now is you got a restaurant that you just bought, that you're trying to run, and you can't hire anybody because anyone that you can hire has to live in Kingston, where I was born, or somewhere else, that has to come into town because they can't afford to live in town, the town where they work. And that's right. That's the zoning. And I don't mind that because it does preserve the mountain that we all love.
Sure.
And the artist community, and there are artists that are supported quite a bit by the guild and other factions, within the town. It's very supportive. But at the same time, there's some low income housing, but not nearly enough. But anyway, that's why the prices are sky high there now.
Yeah, I got my first dose of it. I went to this place called the Yum Yum Noodle Bar, which is Rock City Road.
All right. It sounds right.
And we were sitting there, my wife and I and my daughter, we were eating just ramen, and you could barely hear the music over, in the background, right? Just playing over. We're just sitting there talking. And the lady behind us goes, "Can you turn that music down? It is entirely too loud. When I'm in the city, I get to hear loud stuff all the time, and I come here for peace and quiet." And she just went on and on and on. And we're just like, oh, this is happening.
Yeah. She made the wrong choice.
Yep.
Yeah.
Where to go. She could go to Red Hook. There's a lot of great places around there.
Sure.
I mean, let's just say we just lost Sonny Rollins.
We did, yes. I didn't know he
and
lived there.
We lost Jack DeJohnette not long before that, and Happy Traum, and the list goes on and on and on of world famous people, performers, musicians that have lived there through the years and off and on, and that's the calling card. That's what Woodstock is and always has been from the turn of the century. I'm talking about the turn of the 20th century. Not the the 21st century, and starting with the Art Students League coming to Woodstock.
Yes,
Overlook was one of the most painted watercolor. The watercolorists from the 1880s and what have you would come up just to paint Overlook. So it's always been an artist community, and when the Maverick was formed, which is the theater, the Maverick Theater. Was formed by Harvey White back in the teens and early 20th century. They did festivals and things like that to help support.
Yes.
So there's another guy, Harvey White. Did I say Harvey White before? At any rate, Harvey White started the Maverick, which was up on the other side, and they had to dig a well. And to dig this well, they needed a lot of money because the well had to be like 1,800 feet deep. And they started doing the Maverick festivals. So Woodstock always got started by doing festivals. A lot of music happened then at that point, So it's got that's where its roots came from, and through the years we had festivals up at Mead Meadow, and there was actually a Woodstock festival that occurred in town back in 1964, done by Sonia Malkine, which is like a folk festival.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That happened. At any rate, so there's a lot of history involved in Woodstock and music and the arts. Coming up through, and I'm not a historian, and the writings that I do are not history in terms of like a history book. There's more just my experience of living there and growing up in that scene, because the Cafe Espresso was my living room, our second room, because the apartment my dad rented basically had two rooms. It was our main living room and my bedroom, and he stayed in the living room and had to pass through the bedroom to get to the bathroom. And we lived there from 63 to 70.
You were there
in that one space.
Wow! So through that whole explosion that happened, and it really ramped up after Dylan's motorcycle crash, and then he comes back to Woodstock to, recuperate, and the band comes up and all that stuff, and you're there for that whole thing. That's amazing.
Yeah, I remember the day that happened. And Sarah was driving right behind him going down Strebel Road.
Yep.
And he did something quirky and ended up flipping the bike over and busting his back. But everyone says he had a drug problem and that they were trying to cover up him going into rehab. That's just not true.
Yeah.
He actually injured himself severely. And because I didn't see him after that for a good 6-8 months until actually the first Woodstock Sound Out. When, and that was a crazy story there. All the campfires started raising up really high. We didn't know why. And Dave Boyle had come up to work with Albert Grossman as a carpenter, was doing a fish fry, and he was up the hill going up towards where the offices were, and I'm walking up, and I hear him whining that all his fish was going to burn up. This, that, and the other thing, talking to this curly hair guy who I recognize as Dylan. So I walked up there, I was 13, I hadn't even turned 14 yet. And I looked at him and I said, are you still Bob Dylan? Because, the bottom line was, he had been injured and he'd been off the scene
Yeah.
for years, almost a year or so. And I said, "Are you still Bob Dylan?" And Boyle, Dave Boyle, his expression completely changed. He was almost rolling on the ground laughing. And Bobby looked at me and he said, "Yeah, I'm still the guy. I'm still that guy." And I said, "Well, let me fix you up with a campsite." And so I walked him down and we got him going with a campsite.
Oh, that's
But
great, Dave.
uh, I planted him at the outside of the audience was, and I walked in. And I said, "You mind if Dylan joins you?" Because I found a spot that had no fire in the campsite, but there was a couple guys sitting around, and guys looking at me. "Are you shitting us?" I said, "No, no." So I plop Dylan down there, and I go get some firewood. And we start the fire, and it starts going up really high, and strobe lights come on, and Richie Havens is singing "High Flying Bird"
Yeah.
up on the stage. And I said, "This is not right for Richie Havens having strobe lights and this and that and everything." So I walked behind the thing, and Jocko Moffett is back there with all the fuses out of the fuse box in his hands. He's going, "There's no power going to the stage, man. There's no power going to the stage." And I said, "Jocko, put the screws back in," because it was the old knob and screw.
Yes.
Okay. I said, "Put the fuses back in case the power does whatever, we'll have power." And he goes, right, we'll do that. Right. So I go back out, and there's this like orb in the sky. It's black and flashing on and off, and everyone's dancing to it. It's just crazy stuff. And that was our first UFO experience there. And yeah, it's well documented. Anyone that was there remembers.
Yeah.
Seeing that. So the next day after I've camped out by the stage, my dad comes, and he had been recording. And I said, "Dad, how did that recording come out?" And he says, "It was just white noise." He said, "We missed it. Everything was like, shh, couldn't hear a thing." He says, "Erase the whole tape." I said, "That's too bad."
I don't think there's a single documented recording from any of the sound outs. Not that I'm aware of.
No. My dad recorded it, and then Jocko took it, and somehow all the tapes ended up in a basement, and there was a flood, and it actually got washed down the creek. All those tapes went down the creek, literally washed down the creek.
Now, did Bob Dylan perform out there at all?
No, he did not perform.
In any of the 3 years, right?
No.
Yeah.
No. I've heard the Van Morrison did.
Van? I don't recall that he did. He may have.
I've read that. I'm not sure it's true.
I don't know if it is or not. In 69, Cyril Castor was doing a sound out every weekend.
Yeah.
And he was rained out every weekend. And it rained every weekend. We got rained out every freaking weekend. And so if Van Morrison ever played in 69, it would have been at the Woodstock Playhouse.
Oh, yeah.
Which was also which was the last sound out, because sound out only happened with Jocko. After sound out, they had to call it the Sound Festival, because Jocko owned the rights to sound out.
The name, yeah.
Yeah. So they called it Sound Festival. And when Julius and Putnam started taking it over.
Yeah.
So interesting story. So we were up on bushwhacking up Overlook Mountain. At that time with Julius, who was a famous backpacker. He's written books about backpacking and hiking and everything, and people follow him a lot, even to this day. But we get about halfway up Overlook, and we're sitting on this big rock having a bite.
Yeah.
I looked down and I said, "Oh, who was that guy that right when Cat Mother was playing that was asking you all those questions and you went up into the office with?" And he goes, "Eric, let me show you something." He hop up off the rock, and there's this little creek that's running down by the boulder, and he takes a pebble from the ground, and he holds it outstretched over this clearing part of this where the water is pooled, and he drops it. And he says, "See those ripples that are coming out?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "That's what we just did. We just dropped a ripple. We just dropped a pebble into the pond. and all the ripples that are coming out now are going to be seen by the whole rest of the world. I said, really? He says, yeah, that's what that guy was all about. He's going to do a festival that's going to come up next year, and he wants to have 50,000 people come to it. I said, my God, 50,000 people, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to have all the best bands, and that's what's going to happen. And we finished our hike, and we went back down, and we had a good handshake, and went our ways. But that was Michael Lang, first interviewing with Julius in '68 about what kind of festival he should do, because he wanted to do something for music, a music festival, but he didn't know exactly what he wanted to do. He just wanted to make money. All Michael was interested in is making money so that he could go ahead and start a recording studio.
Yes.
He'd already built the property. He already bought the land called Tapoos. And but it had to be all renovated and everything. And he was going to use that money so artists could come up from the city and be in a relaxed setting and do recording. So that was the motivation, be with him and Cornfield and all his partners.
Yeah.
To get a recording studio going, and they were going to do themselves a nice, tidy music festival to do that. And they picked Walk Hill eventually, and Walk Hill turned him down. I guess he couldn't understand why they didn't want to have 50,000 hippies hanging out in their backyards.
Yeah, what the hell's the matter with those guys?
Like, who knew? But at any rate, they finally settled on Woodstock with only about a month and a half's notice.
Yeah.
So they had to really hustle to get that show together. But Michael always had that Cheshire cat grin on his face.
Yes.
He never lost that all-knowing smile walking through town, and we all knew that Michael would get it done. I remember hanging out in the record shop at the time when he'd come in, and we loved it when Michael would come in because he'd buy every new release for that week. And so that was like 20 records, and for $5 each, that made the record shop's day. So, we loved Michael,
He was great. I ran into him totally by accident once on Tinker Street. He was coming out of the bakery that's there now, Bread Alone. And he was just coming out with his sandwich and coffee. And there was no way. Yeah, there was no way for me to disguise the fact that I knew who he was. So, and he was very nice. He was really nice about it.
Well, yeah, because Michael got that probably 30, 40 times a day.
I would imagine, yeah.
I'm not trying to minimize. I'm not trying to minimize.
No, not at all.
But for Michael, people, he's very recognizable.
Yeah. You can't miss him. Yeah, he looked the same right to the end, pretty much.
But when he heard that people were buying water for like $5 a bottle and stuff like that, he says, "I could have charged that."
Yeah,
he loved laughing. He played that to the hilt, and everyone thought, "Oh, he's a Barker from Coney Island because he grew up in that area." He never once worked on Coney Island, but he did run the first head shop down in Coconut Grove. So getting back to Woodstock. So we're looking at 1967, and I'm about to start my summer vacation. My mom's got this harebrained idea that I should be with my grandmother down in Florida to pay a visit. So my dad and his girlfriend at the time decided not to let that opportunity go to waste. And they drove me down to New York on Friday, and the plane didn't leave till Sunday. And so we had a day and a half or so to kill. And our first stop was WBAI, which is a listener-sponsored Pacifica radio in Manhattan. My dad was a radio announcer, and sitting at the mic was Bob Fass. And the red light was on, and the music that was playing was Alice's Restaurant.
Oh, dude.
And Bob's going, and for the 17th time, I will continue to play this until requests stop coming in.
Yeah.
So it's a 23-minute or whatever Alice's Restaurant, so it's pretty cool because you just put it on and you can talk and walk around the place. It's great for being on air. And so he puts that on and waves us in. And him and my dad are talking about, I don't know what, but I'm just listening to the words Alice's Restaurant, you know. And so they say goodbye, and we plan to see a movie the next day. I don't know if it was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid or what it was, but I forget what movie. But we go back to the Hotel Albert. We wanted to go to the Chelsea, but that was booked, and the Albert was there. And we're getting all settled in, and my dad, or Sandy, his girlfriend, opens up a thing, and all these cockroaches come pouring out.
Oh.
And my dad's just bouncing up in the bed, and all of a sudden there's this shriek, and he's up, and, you know, looking, what's going on? And so the hotel management is there. Oh, sir, we're going to comp you, no problem. They move us to another room. And meanwhile, they took all our stuff. He says, you go out in the city, have fun. And so we met a friend, and we went out on the Staten Island ferry, and we did this and that and the other thing. And we all get together the next day, and we're going back to go out to the movie. And so we go out to the movie, and Rush Harp, who's an assassinologist, was also with us, and we had breakfast with Rush. Was with us as well. And we walk into the studio, and there's Bob, kind of weathered looking at this point, you know, going, and for the 48th time, he just finishes playing that version of Alice's Restaurant. So one thing I remember was hitchhiking from Bearsville down into Woodstock.
Yeah.
And either it was the Albert Grossman or Sally Grossman's, either Sally's Albert's Rolls or Sally's Bentley, but drove by and pulled over to pick me up. And who was driving it but Arlo Guthrie?
Oh, man.
Okay. So I hop in and I continue to tell him the story. I proceed to tell him the story of Alice's Restaurant. Well, at least my version, you know, which he was like, oh, yeah, I remember that, you know, because it was the first time he got that marathon play. Of having his music. But at that time, you could hang out in Woodstock, and any one of like 20 or 30 well-known artists would walk past you within a given half hour. You'd see Van Morrison, you'd see the guys from the band, I could go on and on with how many different people. Todd Rundgren.
Janice. I've heard Janice was there.
Janice lived there for a little while. So did Hendrix, but that's another story.
Yes.
After the festival, I'll tell you that in a second. But
sure.
So at any rate, we haven't even talked about the festival yet, have we?
We haven't.
That's all right.
I'm enjoying this real good. Okay,
love it. No, it's great.
Anyway, so a couple of weeks after the festival, not only did the Incredible String Band came. I was doing the sound at that point for the Purple Elephant, which was the only place that didn't sell alcohol at the time. It was in Woodstock. That also, because I could work there, I was doing the sound and bussing the tables at the same time. I mean, I was doing all kinds of stuff. Anything that anyone didn't want to do, I ended up doing. And so Incredible String Band came in one day, and not long after, and Licky, oh God, I had a crush on her. She was one of the girls in the Incredible String Band, missing her front tooth. Anyway, I liked her, and I let them know it too. I let her know it, and so Michael Huron, who was the lead singer with them, went out back with me, and we had a game of ping pong, because there was a ping pong table set up out back, and he beat the crap out of me in ping pong, kind of to show me like I had overstepped my bounds, coming on with the Licky. So okay, I got the message, Michael. You know, but anyway, Janice comes in, and Jimmy comes in, Hendrix comes in, and Hendrix is carrying his white guitar.
Yeah.
You know, his Strat. And I looked at it and I said, "Oh man, can I see that?" And he pops it in my hand. So okay,
Oh,
great.
wow.
So I got this guitar in my hand. I pick it up and I start to strum it, and I realize it's strung backwards. It doesn't. The sound is like
Lefty.
I said, "Who strung this guitar?" He says, "I did." And I said, "Oh man!" I gave it back to him. And I said, "You strung it wrong." He says, "Well, I'm a lefty." I said, "Okay." Okay, so I'm going to get even with him, right? So I had a game of ping pong with him. Now this guy is tall, and his arms could reach out over the net, over the ping pong net, like no problem, right? And when he shook your hand, his hand wrapped around your hand. Wow. It was a warm, dry handshake. It was really loving guy, but he couldn't return one single serve or anything. He was just stoned out of his gourd. Finally, he said, "Are we even yet?" I said, "Yeah, I guess so." But at that point, Janice had come out, and so she said, "Well, let's give it a shot." So I'm playing ping pong with her.
Man.
And well, the story about Janice was now I'm going to go get a little bit into the festival. It was, I think it was Saturday night. Yeah, it was Saturday night. I had hooked up with this girl, Terry, and the rain had started in the middle of the day, and we pulled this plastic sheet over our heads and stuck it up. I stuck it under my butt, and this breeze came in and blew it up into this big bubble, and here I was inside this bubble with about 50 other people all smoking pot.
Yeah.
And the whole thing filled up with pot smoke. And there's this girl, Terry, that's sitting next to me, who just kept looking better and better and better. And finally, after the rain had stopped, she guides me over to where her tent is and says, "This is where I'm going to be tonight. You come back and see me." I said, "Well, that sounds pretty darn good to me." So I leave and I said, I'll be sure to make it back here. And I did. And I'm not going to get into we're swimming in the lake and all the. I think a whole generation was spawned. I actually know a guy that was conceived there.
Oh wow!
Michael Hunt. It was one of his claims to fame is I was conceived at Woodstock. But I think it was in that same lake that I was in. But at any rate, so I actually did make it back to Terry's tent, and we're getting it on. I mean, she was waiting for me. What little she had on was off by the time we were in there.
Yeah,
and we're going for it, and all of a sudden we hear, "Ladies and gentlemen, Janis Joplin," and this girl popped out from under me faster than a jack in the box. I mean, she knocked the tent over and I got about a gallon of cold water on my back, on my bare back from that had pooled on the outside of the tent. And
man.
It probably took me half an hour to get the tent back set up and Terry back where she was, where I wanted her, so to speak. And, but at any rate, so I related all that to Janice because the first thing Janice said when she was out there in the rain and everything is, "I hope everyone's warm and comfortable out there." And I looked at her and I said, and I shared that with her and she gave me a kiss on the cheek, which is great. So I got to play ping pong with her and got a kiss on the cheek from Janis Joplin and held her hand and we walked back into the back to the elephant. And that's a little tiny Woodstock story there.
Oh, that's great. When I go there, there's a clothing store where one of the bars was now. The clothing store is called Not Fade Away, but it used to be one of the bars. I'm not sure which one. Nobody seems to be able to remember. It was like halfway up Tinker Street on the slope on the left as you're coming in from Kingston. And
that's the pub.
The pub, yeah, the old Woodstock pub.
Yeah, that's the old pub. Yeah.
So that was the pub right there.
Yeah, yeah.
And it has a little step in the back, and
it's got an outside patio.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Somebody said to me, like, I was the first time I ever went there, which was, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago now. Somebody said to me, Janis Joplin fell off that step.
Easily.
Never
So did Lee Marvin.
That.
So did Lee Marvin.
Did he really?
Oh, yeah. I remember Maury Moncure. I remember Maury was a girlfriend of mine when I was in third grade or fourth grade. We used to go to her house, and this is right when Cat Ballou was filmed.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, the movie. And Lee Marvin was her stepdad. And so I would have dinner with them. He was a funny guy, but he was also a stone cold drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah, even in that movie Cat Ballou, where the horse was drunk.
Yeah.
But no, Lee was true to form, and but everyone loved him, and but yeah. Yes, she probably did fall off that. From a lot of people got caught with that stuff.
If you don't mind me interjecting here,
not at all.
What I know and understand about Woodstock in the 60s, the town,
yes,
is that aside from like Dylan and Albert Grossman and Janis and the band, Woodstock was actually a pretty conservative town. It was like back then the political makeup was primarily Republican.
Aaron, getting back to landowners and people having like 30, 40 acres and things like that, and the zoning was all set up by Republicans. That was all set up so that the town wouldn't get overcrowded and encroached by city folks. Okay, which turned out to be their undoing, because the Schultzes lost a lot of their property, and you can look at any of the the old time families that were there. There's many are still there, and there's still factions of those families. Okay, but Val Cadnan, and we're talking. I'm talking even after the festival. The governing body was mostly Republican. Okay, the cop. Billy Watrous was Republican. Van Wagner, that was head of the principal of the school, was Republican. I mean, and they still are. And there's still a very heavy Republican presence in Woodstock. But they loved the band.
Yeah. Okay.
All those rednecks loved the band. They loved Dylan. They loved all the business that was coming into town. Joe Forno, who ran the pharmacy, was in love with all those people. He even if you were a hippie, you could go to Joe and he'd give you his Rolls Royce to drive home from the wedding in, and things like that.
Yeah, one story I heard, a while back, we had a guy by the name of Stephen Lewis who wrote a biography of Richard Manuel. And one story
Manuel.
Manuel. Yeah. Well, one story he tells in this book is that a cop took a picture of Richard on the Ed Sullivan show, so that if Richard was kind of, Richard had serious substance abuse issues, as you might know. Yeah. And if a cop pulled him over, he could show this photo of him on the Ed Sullivan show so that he could just
let him go.
Yeah.
And exactly. And that was Richard Ostrander. Ostrander was the cop. But anyway, yeah. And they say that none of the constables had guns back then, but that's not true. Because you can see a picture of Ostrander with his arm around Richard at the time, and he had a 6-shooter on his side. So, but when we just had constables. But if you were from Woodstock, or you were a kid from Woodstock, like I was, and you went to Little Deep, which is off limits, is trespassing, and the cops would see you late at night and go down in there, and you were with a bunch of city people, and they were about to bust you or search you for drugs or whatever. They saw me and go, "Oh, Eric, yeah, we know him. They're okay." And they walk away, and the guys, because everyone protected everyone. They grew up there. And when I grew up, I was washing dishes at Deanie's, which is halfway up the hill, up Mill Hill, and from the time I was 14, and the guys that became cops and everything were also dishwashers there, or prior to, and they would come help bail me out. So we all grew up together, and we didn't care about politics as much back then. I remember when Goldwater was running against LBJ.
Yeah.
Okay. We all got along great. And they were all going, we want Goldwater, and we were all saying, yeah, but he's going to drop the atomic bomb.
Yeah.
Why do you want a guy that's going to do that? Because he was saying he was gonna, But at any rate, so we all found a way to get along. In 1970, when I was working for the city, for the town, for the tax assessor, that's how I know about how many people had land holdings there.
Yeah.
Val Cadden was Republican, and we got along just great, and the tax assessor was there. I worked with him. Paul Butterfield came up to me once and said, now, look, I know this place looks really good and everything, but it's not really. It's got all these problems, and you have to tell the assessor that. So I did, and he went from a grade A to a grade B, in terms of his assessment. And I couldn't buy a drink when I was around Butterfield, after that.
Really?
But yeah. So I mean, so we all got along. There were some problems. There was a bust once, and I guess they went after about 4 or 5 of my dad's friends and my dad, and they actually planted some pot in his car. And I remember I'm in the 2-room apartment, and this is 66, winter of 66, before the sound out, and what's this? My dad says, I have no idea what it is. He says, well, you're going to come with us. Okay. And they're walking through the bedroom and says, don't wake the kid. Because one of the guys that I worked at the bike shop with was a cop. He says, don't wake the kid. So they didn't. I could have been sleeping on 10 kilos. But don't wake the kid. At any rate, in school they said, what's a kilo? And I said, 2.2 pounds of pot. I thought that was what a kilo was. But at any rate, he says, I'll be back. My dad goes, I'll be back. And he calls H. Clark Bell, which is a Republican guy, but my dad was a radio announcer. And before I knew it, Dad was back. And by the 2 to 3 days later, he worked for Harry Thayer, WGHQ in Kingston, New York, a very conservative guy. Yeah. But Thayer was fair. And he said, we're not going to fire you or anything until we find out what the results are of this, And sure enough, 3 cops got kicked off the police force, and the judge that signed the warrant was just barred.
Wow.
And when I walked through town at the sound out, there was a guy that got busted that was working with a band called the Group Image. He was the drummer.
Yep.
And he went by the name of No Name. And no one was happy on Sunday at the courthouse that he got busted for having no shirt on for indecent exposure. So I showed up there with one of the lead singers, a girl from the Group Image who I had a crush on, who ended up sitting on my lap. That's another story. What came up out of that story. But at any rate, everyone's coming in, and the judge is there, and I walk in, and they all looking at me, and they look at the No Name, then look back over at me, and goes, case dismissed. And so we all hop back in the car, and No Name is now sitting shotgun. There's 2 in the front, everyone else in the back. And of course, this girl plants herself on my lap again, much friendlier than the first time. And but at any rate, he says, "What was that?" And I told him all about the story of how he used the benefit of my dad getting everyone kicked off the police force for being for trying to do something that was unconstitutional or whatever. And so they didn't want to mess around. They really didn't. They were intimidated by me being in there. And they let this guy go, and he's very thankful. Yeah.
Did you ever find out what the reason for the setup was?
Which setup?
With your father. They wanted to set him up.
Yeah. He was hanging out with my dad was hanging out with people at the Espresso, which was the lefties, They were all the lefties.
Oh.
And, by the time 1967 pulled around and the sound outs had started, the Woodstock Sportsman Club had been taken over by the Lysergia head shop. I mean, like, things went transformed in Woodstock. And people were walking around with those all-seeing eyes on their head.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
The third eye. Yep.
Yeah, the third eye. And, and stuff like that. And anyway, yeah. But there was always that dichotomy. And there still is in Woodstock. There still is a strong Republican presence, sure. But now, people, Jeremy Wilbur and a lot of the people that I grew up with have become supervisors. I always thought, isn't it cool to be the mayor of Woodstock, New York? What a cool thing to be. Maybe if I had stayed there, I might have even went for that, or tried for that at some point, just to say I got that feather in my cap, being the mayor of Woodstock.
And that's our show. Keep the Dream Flowing, a Woodstock 1969 podcast, was produced and edited by Scott Parker. Your hosts were Johnny Hudson,
Paul Dittmer,
Aaron Shear, and Scott Parker. Keep the Dream Flowing, a Woodstock 1969 podcast is not associated in any way with Woodstock Ventures or any of its entities. Come and check us out on our Facebook page. The group is called Keep the Dream Flowing, where we keep you updated on various things that we're doing and give you a heads up when there's a new episode coming. So check that out. On behalf of all of us here at Keep the Dream Flowing, this is Scott Parker saying thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.